Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, if you're facing a legal issue, you can expect to shell out between $200 and $300 an hour in our area in attorney's fees. That's a cost that's really just too high for most people. So in this episode, I'll tell you where you can get some help that won't break the bank. Good news there. James Conway, Executive Director of Washoe Legal Services, is here to talk about all of that. James, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so attorneys are kind of notorious for charging enormous amounts of money for their services, but not you guys. So tell me what you guys do.
We are a nonprofit organization, and we offer free and low-cost legal services to vulnerable residents of Northern Nevada.
And you do most of what you do for free, right?
Correct, yes. Most of our programs are free. We do charge a small fee for some areas where we don't have sufficient funding from grant sources, et cetera, but the bulk of what we do is free.
Now, when we talk about legal fees in general, I mean, that's a lot of money. Do you have any ballpark for how much a service would cost a person out of pocket if they don't go through you guys, you know, the things that you guys do?
Mm-hmm. It really depends on the type of case. For instance, a family law case, a divorce. You can have a divorce if you have two reasonable parties represented by counsel for probably a couple $1,000s for each person. But if you have one unreasonable party in that divorce case, then the fees can just get out of control because people are litigating every tiny little issue instead of working together. And the particular type of family law cases we focus on are family law cases in which we represent victims of domestic violence. And those types of cases would sort of are the type where legal fees would just go out of control because most perpetrators of domestic violence like to use finances to control their victim, and they will, you know, engage in protracted litigation and fight about every tiny little issue just for the purposes of doing so.
Right, I imagine in those cases you probably see typically women, domestic violence victims who don't have their own source of income. So if they're trying to get out of this abusive marriage or relationship, they don't really have too many options other than finding an attorney who will work pro bono. Right,
you know, leaving a violent relationship is very dangerous. First and foremost, people fear for their lives when they're trying to make that decision to leave an abusive relationship, and then you add the coercive nature of financial control and just years of abuse and control over somebody, and it's very difficult for them to overcome those burdens and leave that abusive relationship.
And that's where you guys come in, right?
Correct, yeah. We try to help people overcome those burdens, and that's, of course, just one of several programs we have is our domestic violence program.
Is that a pretty common thing in this area? You guys have a lot of need for domestic violence victims needing legal help?
We do, and pretty much every program we have, the need exceeds the resources, so we have to be careful in who we select to represent. It's always difficult to tell somebody that there's not enough resources to help them, but unfortunately we do have to prioritize based upon several different factors depending on the type of case.
You guys do help a lot of people, though. I think I have the number here is more than 7,000 people in 2016.
Correct, yeah, and we're on pace to help almost 10,000 this year. And what I always tell people, help comes in all types of different forms at our organization. And we try to find the appropriate level of help for the individual. So that may be just referring them to another community resource. That may be helping them out through our self-help center where we help them represent themselves in court, or that might be actually appearing as the attorney of record in whatever case they're involved in.
What are you most commonly asked for help with?
I would say landlord-tenant disputes. It's the most common inquiry we have.
And is that like a resident has a problem with their living situation and the landlord isn't fixing it, or the landlord isn't getting paid?
Both. It can run the gamut. So we have people who come to our office because they are being evicted and they want to know what defenses they might have. Sometimes they don't have a defense, and sometimes they do. Sometimes they can defend against the eviction, and sometimes they can just prolong the eviction long enough to find another place to live so they're not out on the street and homeless. And then sometimes it's just resolving issues with landlords, whether it be habitability issues. We get a lot of questions about bed bugs and similar pest infestations and those types of issues.
So what can you do for those people, these vulnerable, a lot of times they're probably senior citizens or real low-income people who live in these places, you know, powerless for the most part. What can you do for them? What are their options?
Yeah, and I mean, you touched upon a key word, which is powerlessness. Because whenever you are low income and you're living month to month, that your landlord really does have an incredible amount of control over you, because it's very difficult to move from your apartment. You have, you know, if anybody who moves to a new apartment, you have to come up with first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. If you're living month to month, you don't have that type of money saved up. And although there are some very good landlords out there, there's also some unscrupulous ones who take advantage of that and know that they have people in a very vulnerable position. So as far as an issue of habitability, we advise people and help them terminate a lease if they're living in something that's unhealthy. You know, a lot of times they think they signed a lease, they're bound to it for a year, but that's not the case. They can send a letter, demand the landlord to make repairs. If those repairs aren't made within the time prescribed by law, then they can terminate the lease and sometimes even sue for damages.
Do you find in most cases people don't know what their rights are?
Yes, and another thing I find is that it often seems like the people who need our help the most are the least likely to actually contact us and reach out for help. So that's a big issue. People not knowing what their rights are and not knowing that organizations like Washoe Legal Services exist to help them.
Okay, so who qualifies for help?
It really depends. So our organization is funded by a multitude of different sources. Some of those are government grants that require certain income guidelines. The most common income guideline is 200% of the federal poverty guideline, which of course varies from person to person depending on how many people are in the household. But some services aren't aren't income qualified as all. We look at age, or we look at things like whether or not they're a victim of crime. We get a lot of funding from the Federal Victim of Crime Act. So for those types of programs, it's whether you're a victim of crime. We will always consider income as a criteria in sort of allocating our resources and setting our priorities, but it doesn't necessarily preclude you just because you're not low income for most of our cases.
Okay, so if someone's watching this and thinking, I didn't know this was a resource that I could access, how is the best way for them to get in contact with you guys?
Well, you can always call us, of course, 775-329-2727. Our website is washoelegalservices.org. And those are the easiest ways to contact us.
Perfect. Okay, we'll get that up on our website as well.
Great.
All right, so I need to ask about how you guys are able to do what you do, and that basically comes down to money. So as we mentioned, you know, it's expensive. Attorney fees are expensive. How are you able to operate without charging your clients?
Well, like I said, we get a lot of grants from government agencies. We get money from the Federal Victims of Crime Act, the Federal Violence Against Women Act, the Federal Older Americans Act. Those are all federal grants that are sort of administered by various state agencies that we apply for and allow us to represent certain individuals depending on those particular grant guidelines. There's also a great program, the Interest on Lawyers Trust Account program, which is administered by the Nevada Bar Foundation. That's the philanthropic arm of the Nevada State Bar. And to summarize that, basically whenever lawyers put money in trust accounts, they pool all that money together, and it draws a rather modest interest rate, but together it generates a great deal of money, about $2 million a year, which is granted out to the 5 legal aid entities in Nevada, Washoe Legal Services being one of them. We also get a significant amount of money from money that's entitled to us by statute for certain fees that are charged whenever people file things in court and file things at the county recorder's office. And of course, private foundations and private individuals who are generous enough to donate to us.
That's a good long list, but I wonder, I mean, you mentioned that you do have to turn people away, so how much more would you need, or how far away are you from being able to meet 100% of the need?
That's a good question. I don't think we're anywhere close to meeting it, so I've never crunched those numbers before. I really don't know.
So you need a lot more, basically.
Yes.
All
A
the help
lot
you
more
can
than
get.
what we have, yeah. Like I said, the need always surpasses the resource, it seems.
Okay, so if people want to help you, do you accept volunteers? Do you need donations? What do you need?
We do. We do accept volunteers. In particular, we do have a pro bono program where we place cases with private attorneys who are generous enough to donate their time and represent individuals for free. So we're always looking for volunteer attorneys to accept pro bono cases. And any individual who wants to volunteer their time and experience to us, there's plenty of administrative tasks beyond representing clients that can be done.
Okay.
And like any 501c3 nonprofit organization, we do accept private donations, and which of course are tax deductible.
Good deal. Okay, well, we have a little less than a minute left. So just in closing, what would be your message to people who maybe haven't sought out your help or haven't sought out legal counsel from any issue they might be dealing with? What do you want them to know?
Well, in any situation, in any dispute, I would say information is power, and if you don't know what your rights are, reach out to us. And it's very rare that we will turn someone away without giving them some level of assistance, even if it's a brief consultation where we tell them they don't have a case. At least they have that knowledge and the ability to make a decision based upon that.
Absolutely, worth asking at least.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you so much for your time. I
Thank
sure
you.
appreciate it. Well, coming up on Face the State, the health insurance industry, of course, is in a state of uncertainty right now, and it's leaving a lot of people looking for help with health care. I'll sit down with one group that provides that help here locally right after the break.